All right, so 5, 4, 3, 2, live. We should be live.
All right.
Welcome to episode 10 of Get the Mic. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
And today we're talking about episode 10 of Akira Toriyama's masterpiece, Dragonball.
I'm excited.
Me too. We have a lot to discuss, so we'll go ahead and get into it. Is there any announcements? I don't think we're going to stream. We might only stream once next week.
Hard to say. We're planning to go live on Thursday next week. We might have a surprise episode before then, but we'll have to see.
We'll have to see. We also had some addendums that we didn't write down and didn't remember.
We definitely don't remember.
There is something, and I think we'll probably bring it up at a later date, concerning Boss Rabbit.
Possibly in the recap.
Yeah, I think we'll probably talk about it later and remember it. But anyways, we don't remember it right now. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we?
Let's dive in.
In the last episode, they just got out of Boss Rabbit's place. They're still in the car that's given to them by the Ox King. It's been fully refueled. And this is our title card here. Is there anything particular that you wanted to say about the title card?
I don't see any Dragon Balls on this title card.
It's true. What is this?
This is just Pilaf's Castle.
Just Pilaf's Castle. DB. There it is.
DB.
So interesting to note, this is one of the first episodes that we have that the English title is the same as the Japanese title.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Excuse me. As you can see in the background, we are still going to be in the Mushroom Forest as well.
The Desert Mushroom Forest.
The Desert Mushroom Forest. Significant. All right, let's go ahead and get started then. First one here, and we have our dragon team heading to find the last Dragon Ball. So only one more until my wish comes true.
I like that in this frame, Bulma kind of looks like Oolong. In the way that she's smiling, the way she's drawn.
A little piggish, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, like how Oolong was when he was like wanting 30 women, a harem of women, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, also, she's just sitting here. She's still not driving the car, and she's just like, can't wait to get my wish.
Well, she thinks she has everything under control.
Mm-hmm.
But anything else you want to say about this? Because I think this is just pretty establishing for them traveling in the car. And I do want to reiterate that they're traveling in the car given to them by the Ox King.
Right. The mode of transportation, we'll call it transportation for now, that they got from their experience with the Ox King. That was given to them by the Ox King for what they did.
Yes, and, moving from one place to another is something that needs to be, let's say, facilitated by some mechanism. Now, the speed at which you can do that determines how quickly you can change your surroundings. But in a metaphorical sense, moving from one place to another as a person, I think in this case the car is represented. I don't think it's so simple as just transportation, right?
Right. Well, it's transportation in the literal sense, but it's a mode of being in the more metaphorical sense.
Right. And so they're on their way. Oolong asked the question, what are we going to wish for? Because you see, Oolong believes that since they've all contributed to, let's say, the goal of enlightenment here, then they all need to benefit from the reward, let's say.
Right. Well, he sacrificed his own mode of being for this journey, let's say.
Not really willingly. He kind of it's kind of a compulsion.
Well, initially not willingly, but there was a time where he made the decision to stay anyway, right? Where they were passed out, and he watched them overnight, and he made the decision that it was a voluntary thing, right? And
Wait, that was the last episode. He watched them overnight?
No, whenever Yamcha came for the Dragon Balls in the night.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Pilaf sent his henchmen too.
Yes.
Was that the last episode?
No.
Yeah.
No, what I'm saying is, I don't know if that's so much of it, because at that point, they're like still in his camper, let's say. Last episode, I think it was more poignant because Oolong had the chance to leave. In fact, he does leave when Blooma's a carrot.
Right. I mean, it's happened multiple times at this point. It's pretty much established that, like, you know, he runs away when he can be stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And when he can't be stopped, he sticks around.
Mm-hmm.
And that's happened multiple times now, I think. But yeah, especially in the last episode, too, where it was like, he did get away.
He was scot-free. But here, he's upset that only one will benefit from this, right? And it's funny, Goku's face is, he's kind of just oblivious on what's going on. Whereas Bluma is clearly elated at the fact that she is telling Oolong this, right?
Right. That
She's reveling in it, let's say.
Yeah, it's interesting because she is just like so absorbed in her own wish, right? Goku's like, I'm not really that focused on the wish. I'm still just focused on gathering the Dragon Balls, you know. And then Oolong's just outraged because.
Well, and I think it goes to describe the mode of being and how they might react to that. So basically, in this instance, Bluma is saying that her path to enlightenment, and especially because, it's not here. It's later on in the episode, right, that Oolong criticizes her wish. I think.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
It's in this episode.
So it's in this episode. It's later though. But what I want to say is, like, the mode of being of Goku, right? He's focused on the path and therefore can't even fathom why someone would be upset, right, about it. Bluma's not, and let's say Oolong is not, as we're going to see later on exhibited in this episode. But more importantly, the mode of being of symptom, let's say, that we've attributed to Oolong would be upset at this very thing. How do, let's say, fans of thoughts feel when it's revealed that they have boyfriends?
Oh, of course. I mean, it's great, this sort of dynamic here where it's like, you know, you can think of it like a simp donating into the stream, right? Not really knowing what the money's going to go towards, right?
Oh, this is good.
And then realizing that the money was all for an expensive date with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, what was all of this for? And that's kind of the reaction we're seeing from Oolong here, where he's like, what is all of my effort to help you get your goal been if it was to find a boyfriend?
Right, and we'll see how flawed that wish really is later. It doesn't work that way. You can't really confront the Dragon of Chaos, in the way that Bluma thinks she will, and be able to come out of it with someone who's, let's say, subservient or subordinate to you.
Right.
So we'll move on to the next part. Oops. So, yes, Oolong continues to criticize her, indicating that they're putting their lives at risk for a stupid wish like that. And it's interesting, Oolong's objections, though they are right, they may come from a place that's not entirely pure. It's not a very good wish. But at the same rate, the reason he's criticizing it, right, is a flawed.
Right, it's for a selfish reason. Now, that's not to say that Bulma's wish is as good as, let's say, Yamcha's wish, which we're about to see. Because I think this scene specifically is to show the sort of dynamic between those two wishes. Because Yamcha's following and watching as they have this argument that they're about to have. And reiterates his own wish as well. But yeah, hers is, I would say, a less noble. Hers is about, I want to obtain the thing, whereas...
Well, it's significant to note as well that, let's say, their opposite sexual counterpart in each of their situations, Oolong and Puar, are reflective of how, let's say, not righteous, but how oriented each of the characters are.
Mm-hmm.
So we see that Oolong's is of outrage, right?
So
What is this?
So they get into this argument, and Oolong's like, "Oh yeah," and he starts swerving around like he's gonna run into one of the mushrooms.
He's driving, right?
And there's
Yeah.
a short little section of maybe 3 frames that looks like this, and I just thought it was a pretty great representation of what's happening right now.
Well, right. I think it's especially poignant because it is a physical manifestation of the struggle between Bluma's psyches.
Mm-hmm.
The indication in her conscience, in this case, Oolong, telling her, this is not a very good thing to wish for. You're orienting yourself towards the wrong thing. And by doing so, you're not only risking yourself, but those around you. I think that's exactly what the physical manifestation of the potential crash is in this instance. And Oolong couldn't even control it because Bluma's the one that's driving the car.
Ultimately, yeah. Yeah, I agree. And of course, there's Goku.
He's on the path. He has nothing to worry about.
He's like, well, I don't care about a car. Like, I'm just in here because they're in here. I
Literally does not have to be in there. Exactly. And so, then we do see Yamcha. And we have the one tooth missing motif that we'll see a little bit more in this episode.
I think we'll see it a lot in this episode.
And so, while they're driving along, Yamcha and Puar see them, and he restates his wish. And I think it's important to note how often these characters state what they want, because they're trying to manifest it in the world, and therefore speaking it into existence is one way by which you can stay on the path, let's say.
Right. I mean, you can look at it like, oh, this is older animation, and that's just how they had character dialogue go. It's like they just state what they want. There's no subtlety to them. That's why it's boring. That's why older stuff isn't as interesting, right? But in this case, I don't think that's quite it, right? If you compare this to what we just saw, where they're both stating their wish and sort of contextualizing it in front of somebody else that also sort of exists to represent an extension of themselves. It's like, well, maybe there's a purpose for them randomly stating their intentions.
Yeah, perhaps it's not as simple as it seems. And I think that Yamcha's wish is way more oriented towards something good. And that's why Puar supports him in almost every bit of his endeavor throughout the entire series.
Mm-hmm. He's not conflicted internally in the way that Bulma ultimately is.
And in fact, too, we will see Puar urge Yamcha to do things that are more oriented towards what he should be. But that's later. We'll get to that later. Anything else we want to say about Yamcha?
Nope, it's just another episode of Yamcha watching other people do stuff and saying stuff about what they're doing, at least for now.
Note, though, they don't get in a crash. They don't even come close. So then, back at Pilaf's castle.
So Pilaf is rushing Mai to fix something.
Well, they still only have one Dragon Ball.
This is true.
So some context here. We haven't seen Pilaf in a couple of episodes.
Oh, I guess that's true, yeah. So they're kind of just out of the game. They're the final Dragon Ball, essentially, in Goku's story, right? And Pilaf is pressuring Mai to quickly fix an aspect of the Dragon Radar, I believe, or he'll feed her to the alligators.
Well, and I think it's significant, too, to say that despite the fact that they're the last Dragon Ball, right? Well, maybe not despite the fact. The reason why they're the last Dragon Ball is that the last thing, let's say, the first hierarchy of competence has to contend with is the idea of false malevolence. And Pilaf embodies that more even than the boss rabbit. He is exactly a petulant child with power.
Right. It's sort of the...
You have to grow out of that spirit of being. And there's times when, even as adolescents, you can look back and realize that you were acting like Pilaf, let's say.
Right. I think it's if you want to sort of extract this out and say that the first arc is about the first step for Goku, this is Goku overcoming the mode of being that Pilaf is, and is sort of the thing that the hero could fall to with power, right?
Mm-hmm. And we already know that Goku's powerful.
But it's interesting here that, obviously that it's alligators, it's these reptiles that he has.
Yes. Well, I wanted to also say real quick the meta idea of Pilaf instantiating this idea of corruption by power actually will be a recurring theme throughout the show.
Mm-hmm.
Because Goku will constantly be gaining power, let's say. And by power, we obviously mean moral fortitude, not physical strength. Even though physical strength is the mode by which Toriyama expresses that idea.
Mm-hmm. That's the way that he represents it.
Yeah. And so so the alligators, it is interesting. He would feed her to the alligators because they have failed consistently at getting the Dragon Balls at this point from Goku. They got the first Dragon Ball in episode 2 or 3?
Mm-hmm.
It's been 7 episodes, 8 episodes?
It's basically been a season of them being comic relief characters because of it.
Right. And Pilaf has had it. So he's pulling out the serious, well, as serious as Pilaf can be.
Right, and he's threatening
measures.
himself, essentially. That's like with that which he fears, you could say, which is represented in the snake-like predator. Ultimately, it's the snake predator. In this case, it's alligators. And so you see this thing where we've spoken before about Pilaf pressuring himself to an undue degree to accomplish something that he doesn't deserve.
Yeah, tyrannizing
that's
himself.
above his own level of competence.
Mm-hmm.
And we see an extension of this where he's tyrannizing himself with the fear of, I don't want to just call it chaos. It's just like he is instantiating a fear in himself of the unknown to motivate himself.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly.
Well, I'm curious why you're very hung up on the alligators. I mean, I what my idea was about that is that it is almost literally a joke. And Pilaf's actions are a joke, even though he's trying to be serious.
I mean, it is a joke, but the imagery of the
Well, yeah, no, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying on that, but like being fed to alligators, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's like a trope, a cliche, right?
Sure.
And it's significant to note Pilaf's lack of creativity in that regard.
True. I mean, it's sort of like the supervillain go-to, just like, I'll throw you to the
alligators,
whatever it is in the trope, right?
Right, and I think it's
yeah, that notwithstanding, I think that, of course, it's alligators for Pilaf.
Of course.
Because of his alignment.
And so here, his female aspect is able to manipulate him using her own, let's say, her own powers over Pilaf. So Pilaf's feminine aspects ability to manipulate himself is so weak, but in this instance, it is able to overcome, but it's very blatant in doing so.
Right. So this is sort of just like a way to distract himself and dial himself back from this constant self-tyranny.
Well, I think it's significant too because he doesn't actually want to punish himself.
Right, and this is sort of the, well, I mean, it's ultimately a joke, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is him internally being that immature, right? Like even the thought of conceptually that there was someone there. It's like, we'll see that in the next panel. It's so funny because it just shows how immature he is.
The next panel's great. And so, as these alligators are screaming in their pen, he's just flustered. And I think it too. It's because Pilaf is sexually repressed. Let's say.
Mm-hmm. I think that Pilaf is an island, right?
Yes.
And he has a feminine and masculine aspect that are represented in the world, and the feminine one is more mature, older, and the masculine one is small and sort of childlike in the way that he's drawn, similar to Emperor Pilaf, right? So, I mean, I would say that is representative of possibly the way that he views himself and the way that he views other or the opposite sex.
Yeah, he's very, and we'll see this next episode as well. He's very immature when it comes to sex and sexual things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that let's say the dragons of chaos are crying out for him to improve himself in this, and he is just too overwhelmed with his own, let's say, his own tendency for interpersonal. What is it? Interpersonal.
Victimhood?
Yeah.
Ah, yes. Well,
not so much of that. It's more of the rumination on his embarrassment in this instance.
I kind of want to tie a couple of concepts together just in this panel too, because I usually if a panel sticks out to me, I feel like there might be a little bit more meaning to it. So, associating the predator reptile with fear, right, and the way that Pilaf is sort of flustered at the idea of this, attractive female. As that happens,
with a large bosom,
the reptiles in his pen stir and roar, and it's sort of like that is that which you seek lies where you fear to seek the most. I think that's what
it's something like
something
that.
like that.
That which you seek is where you are least likely to look, or something like that. Yeah.
And so it's just like, you see that it's something that he desires enough to distract him from even what is happening in front of him, which is pressuring himself to redefine the plan. Right. Yes. This is enough to just fluster him and scare him. Right.
Well, he's also disoriented at this moment. Yeah. Right. And I think that's significant too. So, anything else about this? All right.
No.
Oops. So, they start. Is this before? Oh, no. Okay. So I remember what happens. So, Mai starts piecing together their dragon radar, their guiding ordinance that doesn't seem to come from any kind of established wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
It is simply a construction of arrogance. So, Mai fixes it well enough to be able to sense one single Dragon Ball. But I'm curious why you picked out this picture.
Well, I have a couple of thoughts about this, because my first takeaway from it was, let's say that the Dragon Radar as a concept is representative of a plan to achieve the goal that you would achieve if you were confronting the Dragon of Chaos, right? And so it's like she gets the plan back together, and the plan leads her to a Dragon Ball. It's like, a Dragon Ball. We need a Dragon Ball. But it leads to the Dragon Ball they already have. So Pilaf's envious nature is that he wants to have the Dragon Balls. And it's very funny that the first thing that the plan tells him is, you have a Dragon Ball. Right? That's not the plan.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of funny to me that like having the Dragon Ball is like your first Dragon Ball.
Well, it's like the malformation of in orientation.
Well, and it's the 1-star ball. It's like you're still at the first hierarchy here.
You're right.
Like you're not conquering the self.
Mm-hmm.
At least in Pilaf's context, right? I don't know if it necessarily represents that in the numbering of the balls, but it's like you're stuck. You're hung up here on your first ball.
Well, I think it is significant for Pilaf, and we'll get into the balls that other villains collect. It's interesting. Some of the numbers do kind of line up.
Mm-hmm. I think that,
and
that's
not an accident. It's not an accident.
I think it actually occurred to me, not necessarily with what the ball, what balls the villains collected as much as a time where we'll see a non-villain character, a good character, collect a ball that seems to be significant to the theme of their character.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sort of stood out to me. But I think it's funny here, because it's like, that's the first layer of it, right? But then also saying that this plan is constructed of arrogance. It's like, yes.
And that's exactly why it leads
to yourself, to what you have already.
Well, I think it's interesting too on that, because it's saying to find your way to, let's say, enlightenment, to confront the Dragon of Chaos, you first have to look inward.
You have to look at the wisdom that you already have.
Yeah, and establish wisdom as well, because Bluma's dragon radar, let's say, is partially constructed by her and partially, let's say, constructed by the knowledge passed down from her ancestry.
Right, knowledge of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
But of
mapping of the unknown.
Mapping of the unknown and the wisdom that comes from that's passed down.
Right, that those two things together are more efficient than, let's say, this machine
the
of
singular
arrogance.
Nature of this.
Yeah. And I have no idea what this diagram is even supposed to be.
I think it's just the box.
Oh, is that the box? Yeah, I see it.
When I first saw it, I thought maybe this has something to do with the one radar being 2-dimensional and the other being 3-dimensional, and then it's just a funny joke.
So Shu immediately goes and gets the box and says, "Look, here's the Dragon Ball.
We have a Dragon Ball."
And so Pilaf is a little upset about that. But back to the point about Shu, he's malformed. He's a malformed version of the male aspect of Pilaf that's permanently and intentionally repressed. The Logos is not allowed to express itself, and actually many times Shu is the voice of wisdom that if Pilaf would listen to, things would be better off.
Right, Shu not listening, or I would say Pilaf not listening to Shu is a way for Pilaf not to incorporate his masculinity and
not to
have
accept responsibility either, right? Yeah. And so
here we are, Shu, this repressed masculine aspect of himself, bringing him the wisdom that he does have, and him just being like, "You idiot, I already know I have wisdom." It's like, do you though?
Yeah, it's not taking stock of a piece of himself, trying to notify and trying to inform and orient. All of those things are completely ignored and overlooked for the purpose of having the Dragon Balls.
Right. And that's his plan. His plan is to have the Dragon Balls. Right. It's like. So yeah, it definitely, I think, is just a funny. I don't even know if it's necessarily an intentional thing, but it definitely lines up that as we look at the radars in the context of what the Dragon Balls are, then it makes perfect sense that this is what his radar would do and what that would represent. Now, there's also... I'm trying to remember what the next slide is.
Hold on, because it's not just Shu, too. It's not just Shu, because Mai's actions in the scene also lead him to the wisdom that he already has and ignores. Let's say. So, not only his male aspect, his female aspect, both of which are repressed, one more than another, let's say.
Well, I guess we could tie it all together then, huh?
Yeah, tying it all together to say those both were indicating one thing to him that he simply did not even want to acknowledge.
Well, you can even tie it in to say that which led him to the wisdom that he already had was the feminine spirit, and that which sought out and got it for him was the masculine spirit that maps and obtains things.
And it's a microcosm of a conquering of a hierarchy that he cannot compartmentalize.
And of course he just rejects it because here he is still.
It's like, let me explain to you in kindergarten speak. I already know that. It's like, but you don't use it. You don't apply it.
Do you really know it?
Yeah.
Right? Because if you knew it, then you would incorporate it into your actions, your embodiment, right?
And as we've seen Goku and the Dragon Crew collect more Dragon Balls, they become more complete people.
Well, think about we're already seeing Oolong progresses his character.
Oolong's progressed. He's chose to stay, right? Bluma is more resistant, but Goku's grown a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see Bluma grow. Don't worry. But right, so that's what's going on there. Then, in the Mushroom Desert. So we've talked a little bit about the Mushroom Desert.
Just a little bit.
But continuing here about the Mushroom Desert, we can say that a desert, right, is a place devoid of nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
You can't replenish yourself there, right? All those things. And it's desolate. However, the mushrooms, like I think we said in the previous one, can represent that growth, that enlightenment that you can attain. Let's say symbolically, or not even symbolically, but you can attain from an evolutionary point of view from how, let's say, our ancestors as human beings viewed mushrooms.
Well, it's interesting because you can say on a spiritual level that mushrooms represent the thing that you take away from nature that can take you on a path to self-enlightenment, right? And so it's sort of the nourishment of the soul that can be found through the mode of being that can survive, or not survive, but can master the domain of nature, right? So it's what you take away from nature, that growth spirit, and also the wisdom of the earth itself.
And in pagan tradition, that's what mushrooms were that grew under fir trees during Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
They were Christmas presents because they could bring you to a place that otherwise you could no longer go. And the mushrooms here, while not exactly toadstools, they're definitely recognizable. And the forest itself, the design of it is great because it's all of these opportunities for growth that surround Pilaf,
mm-hmm.
and he ignores.
Well, in his estimation, it's just a desert, right? The mushrooms represent all of the opportunity in the experience of conquering the desert.
Right.
And so he instead built a castle in the desert. And he has all of his
to guard up his wisdom
already.
That he doesn't appreciate.
Right. So it's almost like, what's the purpose for me to travel through the desert and gain that wisdom if I can just bring all the Dragon Balls to me in this castle?
And then have them.
Because having them is the wish. Or having them is the plan, I should say.
Yeah. Oh, we don't have the... Wait, what is this?
So, basically, Bulma insults Oolong and calls him a kid whenever he challenges her wish. And he says, "Oh, if I'm a kid, well then fine." And he stops the car. Stops driving it. He says, she said that he hasn't been very useful, and he says, well then, if I'm not that useful, why do I need to drive this car?
And this is a struggle right now between Bluma and trying to tyrannize her, let's say, action-oriented persona in Oolong. Her persona mapped on Oolong, let's say, because he's carrying out her will in this instance.
Right, we're seeing a disconnect between intent and motivation. Right, Bulma's intent is not good enough to keep the motivation for the masculine aspect, which is that which drives the car, which moves.
Well, it's not. It's not just that. It's saying that if women are on a course that they can't reconcile with their, let's say, logical nature, their more masculine nature, the logos, right? Then that part of it is not going to help you in any way on that journey.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you're disrespectful and resentful towards that spirit.
Right.
As flawed as Oolong is, right? As cowardly as he is, he's shown himself to be useful.
Well, he has shown himself to be protective,
and Bluma in this instance is showing resent and disregard for all things, all things that are Oolong. In which case, you lose that ability, let's say, But I think we're gonna continue here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oops. So Bluma uses this again.
So, right, she's like, oh, well, you're not going to willingly get me where I want you to take me, then I guess I'll just shame you into it.
Mm-hmm.
So she shames him, and it works. Again.
How can it not? It's not something... It's something a little bit harder for Oolong to get over, let's say.
Right, we're not there yet for Oolong.
Mm-mm. He's come a long way. He's stood up to Bulma this time and has actually had some back and forths with her where he's not completely on the losing end like a few episodes ago.
Right, he is becoming stronger as a character.
PPP. Ha! Oh, that's funny.
It's great.
It's actually... Is that true? I don't think they're married.
No. Well, we don't know. I guess we don't ever see that, but it's
no,
funny.
No, I don't know. Definitely not.
We just know it happens, and that's it.
That's hilarious.
So, Oolong's not very happy with the dynamic here.
Because of the resentful way that she's treating him, obviously. But
and you know, in the Japanese dub, he says, "Nobody's ever gonna marry you." In the Japanese sub, I should say.
And it's partially out of spite, but that's actually partially trying to tell Bluma the truth, that if she continues to act this way, it's not going to end well.
Yeah, it's like, with that attitude, no one's ever going to want to be committed to you.
Yeah, it's a tyrant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to see some more criticism of Bluma coming up.
I like Bluma's face in this frame too. She's just like,
this is fine.
This is fine. I don't need to listen to this. Just get back in the car and start driving.
Or I'll say PP again. Is quite juvenile in her own right.
Mm-hmm.
So then there's an explosion.
They get exploded. So Pilaf has sprung his attack. Because now that they have a functioning radar, they can see that all of the balls are coming closer to them.
Yeah,
and
I thought we had one of Mai saying something. Did we not have a shot?
Well, I think I just had the shot of her standing there watching them.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, Mai reports that she saw this, and they get ambushed. Which I think it's funny that, that this is Pilaf's. This is ultimately Pilaf's wish, right? He doesn't want to leave. He doesn't want to go out of the desert and go get the Dragon Balls. And so they just are delivered to him.
Well, it's also significant about when it happens, I think. The moment it happens is when Bluma tries to tyrannize Oolong so much as to force him as an unwilling actor, let's say. Most of the time that she does that, it doesn't work out for her. There's some aspect, and this is maybe not.
Well, it's in this moment also that it's like there's nothing in it for you, right? Mm-hmm. You don't get me, you don't get a wish, you get nothing. You don't get appreciation.
If you're gonna act this way towards the spirit of the Logos, right? Something like that, then yeah, clearly. And so the car goes explode.
Right. So this I think this is to say that
the fandom says, okay.
Well, I think it's to say that this schism is enough that you can lose lose your wisdom.
Well, think about this. Nobody's ever going to marry you. The mode of transportation provided by the societal father who expects marriage instantly explodes.
Boom. Destroyed.
If you act that way, you not only destroy yourself, but you destroy the wisdom of society. Mm-hmm. Thoughts are currently doing that, destroying the wisdom of society.
Yes. Yeah, I would say, like, and this is kind of funny in the context of like the bite of Oolong's character, right? So Oolong is sort of the just sad simp. But then you've got Pilaf here, who is just like...
and even sadder.
Just, as soon as there's an opening there, right? This schism, this weakness, he's there to blow up the whole car that society gave them and say, I'll take all of that.
Mm-hmm. Because he also has no value on the wisdom of society, let's say. And we can see that because he's an island. He's out here away from society.
Mm-hmm.
But he wants to be ingratiated in society. It's oxymoronic, Pilaf's desires. Even if he got what he want, he wouldn't be happy.
Well, that's kind of the point, right?
Yeah. So, I don't know what they're looking at.
That is the robot right there on the very left of the frame.
Okay, so the robot, maybe we have a better picture of it in the next couple of slides, but the robot destroys the car, and that's who does it. And it's Shu, by the way.
Yes, so we'll see it in the next frame that Shu has arrived in a big jumping robot that's almost insect-like and has destroyed their car and says, I'll be taking the Dragon Balls. I think I just grabbed this frame because I thought it was a great reaction frame. You always have to grab the good Dragon Ball reaction frames.
Oh, of course. But I think what I was going to say is it's significant that it's Shu that steals them. Again, it is Mai that leads them to it, and it is Shu that carries out the action, just like we saw in the microcosm earlier. Right? Not only that, but it is the malformed masculine form that can destroy the wisdom of society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because much like Oolong,
well,
right?
It's the malformed masculine form in a position of, I don't want to just call it authority, but a position of inherited power.
Well, it's not even inherited. It's artificial because it's the robotic, right?
I guess just a position of power in general because he's
an undeserved, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it's Shu particularly, even though because Shu does try to act in a way that would be forthright. Shu himself as a character, he's not able to because of Pilaf.
Right. His modus operandi is something that is not aligned with the good.
Right, not aligned, but I mean, he still embodies what the masculine spirit should embody. It's just malformed.
It's being utilized.
And since it is, it's going to destroy the toxic nature of the masculine and feminine interface between Bluma and Oolong within the wisdom of society. You don't get that anymore then.
Mm-hmm.
Much like how he tries to, in his actions, steer Pilaf towards the right orientation, Shu does the same thing here with the characters, our characters, the dragon team.
Right, because that is what he does.
Mm-hmm. And he'll continue to do. Mm-hmm. So, well, until, basically. So let's go to the next one.
So yeah, he is here for the Dragon Balls.
Here he is. Bingo, bango, bongo, wongo, chongo.
He found 5 whole Dragon Balls, and 5 plus 1 equals 7.
And since he is also, let's say, oriented towards something not forthright,
and because he's not good at math,
he's unable to realize that he does not actually have all of the Dragon Balls. But he goes ahead and takes them nonetheless, and they're within is in the top, let's say, right-hand corner of the suitcase, you can see the capsule pouch.
Oh, yes, the capsules
that Bluma got last episode. That, remember, represent that small amount that the feminine form can reliably extract from society when in need.
Right. This is stripping everybody of their power in this situation.
Yeah, you don't get any of the benefits of society when you are going to treat the other half of it in the way that you are.
When you're going to denigrate the value of the balance that's been stripped.
And the spirit of it, too.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we see sharp tooth, predatory, right? Like, I'm very much taking glee in doing this, and that's part of the malformed masculine, right? I love how we set up this, and they both just went right on there.
That's great. Yeah, I like this too because it's the most menacing we've seen Shu, and I think this is because Shu is enacting that primordial masculine thing, which is to get the thing, whatever the thing is. Right? He's
to take action to get the thing. More importantly,
and it's as simple. It's simpler than that, but that's as simple as I can articulate it. Right? It's that. The archetypal masculine boils way, way, way down to that thing, which is to go out and get, to map. And so, yeah, it's just like this is the malformed masculine, but it is the masculine spirit.
I like, too, that his vision is focused on only things he can see in front of him.
Right, he's got the
it helps
sort of
focus that kind
bubble.
of... Yeah, it helps.
Or lens. I guess it's more like a lens.
In terms of sight on what he should be trying to acquire, which may contribute to the fact that he's so, let's say, aggressive in this instance because he's been blind to the other things around him. But anyways, yeah, I do also like this.
Well, let's talk about the robot too then because of that, because I thought it was a little bit insectile in the way that it's shaped. It jumps around like an insect, and it's got the single eye in the front, and you see it from his perspective. It's almost like seeing through one big eye. You're seeing through like this pupil, right? And it's almost like here is an artificial way to orient yourself towards something. And whenever I think about an insect, I think about thought, I think about conscience, I think about sort of the self-aware mode of thinking. So creating a robot that is an insect, well, we'll come back around to that idea, I think, multiple times throughout Dragon Ball and Z, but taking the malformed masculine and sticking it into this artificial way of thinking that can orient you directly at one specific thing just to get like a singular task done. It's like that's what this is.
Right, it's the most basic form of consciousness that he's given.
But he wears it as an armor too. It's like this way of thinking is protecting me as I just come and get whatever I want.
Mm-hmm.
I think way of thinking is closest to how I can articulate that.
It's interesting. I didn't think about the insect aspect of it as much. You could also attribute that to the nature of Shu being an extension of the will of Pilaf, considering insects sometimes are hive-minded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It didn't stand out to me except for at the end of this. I don't think I got a shot of it, but he goes up on top of the mushrooms and hops away like an insect, not like a grasshopper or something. And that's what really made me think about it. I was like, I always kind of thought it was just goofy the way that a lot of the robots and stuff throughout all of Dragon Ball and Z have this insect-like behavior. Like they hop around and they skitter and they generally look like that.
Stop trying to make me think about Cell.
Eventually we have to think about Cell. But in this case, the hopping insect-like robot, I initially took it to just be like, yeah, this is how robots are. But then, I don't know, maybe there might be a little bit more to it.
And I think you are onto something, considering the automation of insects, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
They're automatons. More so than mammalian or even reptilian creatures.
Mm-hmm.
They're also furthest, let's say, away from us evolutionarily.
Right.
And so it's important to see the juxtaposition, let's say, of the insect form and what we will see as Goku's form.
Right. I think so. I think that this is important. Really, I guess.
Important groundwork for the next few episodes.
Yeah, if we're going to tie all these episodes in together, yeah.
Which we have to, because it's like a 4-parter. And so, as it was exploded, Goku ain't scared.
Goku's just like, well, that was weird.
That was something.
But I like that. So, the reason that this happened was the schism between Oolong and Bluma. And they've reached a point where I wish I had kind of grabbed a shot of it, but they're kind of squaring off and arguing with each other. And it may not be yet, but somewhere around here, they're just completely opposed to each other. But in this moment where the Dragon Balls and the capsules and clothes, too, in the case, have just been taken from them and their mode of being has been destroyed, their reaction is the exact same, right? So Goku's in the middle, reveling at the strangeness of the situation, but Bulma and Oolong are both having the exact same experience. They've both been shocked in the same way, and they're just laid low by it. And I think that is a place that people can be when they try to continue on this path without integrating those two aspects of the self, right? The aspect that is coming up with the reasons for doing things, and that's orienting you towards things, and then the aspect of yourself that needs to go and do those things. If you can't keep those united on that path, this is where you'll be, and then both will be laid low and evened back out again if you choose not to do it yourself and do the self-maintenance, right?
Correct. But additionally, I think it's important. Actually, no, we're not there yet. I was going to bring up Yamcha. We're not there yet. Because first, what has to happen is Goku has to go try and get the Dragon Balls back.
Mm-hmm.
So hops on the Keen Tone and flies off.
And I'll point out here that it's Bulma who says, Goku, get the Flying Nimbus and go get him. And he's like, oh yeah.
Right, because
similar to what happened with Pilaf, Bulma's the one to say, hey, here's the plan. Here's what you need to do.
Right, and that is partially because Goku is not yet... it's not so much autonomous, but he realizes that he needs to subordinate himself to the feminine in order to grow first before he can take on things on his own. His consciousness needs to be awakened before he can go off on his own.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Bluma says that, and he goes off to find the Dragon Balls. I do like this. Shot as well.
Yeah, it's a really good shot. Good panel.
Good panel. You got the dust flying up, but it does emphasize the desert nature again, and.
Well, also it's interesting too. I like the imagery of thinking about this one really gives it the scale, the desert, and then extending up into the sky as you elevate.
It's just more yellow.
As you elevate your gaze, there is the contrasting mushrooms up to orient yourself upwards towards. Right. It's almost like it's almost too literal. Right. It's the enlightenment of the mushrooms represented.
You should be up here, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so here's Goku. I mean, he's on the Keen Tone, but he's still underneath the mushrooms.
Mm-hmm. And so, okay, so then we see this, and you're gonna have to describe this one because I vaguely remember.
So this is just them getting away and abandoning the robot here. So the robot is empty, and Mai and Shu flee with the Dragon Balls in a plane.
quadrupedal.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot that it was quadrupedal. Interesting, very interesting.
Well, you can see
design.
It's actually got 6 appendages.
Yeah.
So yeah, they abandon the robot, fly off in the plane, and it sets up the situation where when Goku finally finds the robot, he does not find Mai and Shu, but instead finds the empty husk of what they used to steal them in the first place.
Mm-hmm. The automaton at the heart of it, right?
Right.
That is useless without a will.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's funny the way it goes down. I think it's in the next couple panels. The Goku comes into contact with it and immediately challenges it and all it does is slowly close, causing him to jump back and square off, and he's worried about it because whenever it was manned by the masculine spirit, it was able to steal the Dragon Balls, right? And so I think this only further cements the way that I'm interpreting this robot, which is that the idea itself is nothing compared to what Goku represents. And we can see that here because it poses no threat. The idea that I say idea, it's the way of thinking by which the masculine spirit can single-mindedly orient towards something that is without morality, right? Mm-hmm. Like to come and take someone else's path from them or anything like that, right? This is that way of thinking. And of course, it's nothing compared to Goku, right? In and of itself, without someone utilizing it to do... Well, utilizing it to accomplish something in the world, good or bad.
Its power is nothing without a will, and Goku is almost the ultimate will, right?
Right, and it's also just Goku's not going to fall to those ideas and that way of thinking, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, he just attacks it, and it's insubstantial.
He just doesn't get it. He doesn't understand the idea behind this creature, this robot.
Right. It's pretty foreign looking. Also, it's very strange.
It's true.
It's pretty unlike anything we've seen him square up against.
It's foreign looking. It has a claw. It's got 4 legs, and I do think that insect description is apt. I think too it's worthy of mentioning Goku's tail and how mammalian Goku is.
Especially now, yeah.
In contrast with this insect form, which, like we said, is let's say, mindlessly orienting yourself towards something regardless of morality. Mm-hmm. I think that's more of what it is. And I think that's actually descriptive of insects.
Yeah, I think that's good because it also is pointing out that you can get at least part of the collection of Dragon Balls by using that mode of being.
Right, you can, but you're not going to be able to get, well, we'll get to it. And so, yeah, Goku doesn't even know how to confront this. He is so far beyond this in terms of his understanding of morality that he can't even fathom a way to act that is immoral or amoral. Not immoral, but amoral.
Right. He doesn't know whether or not it's to be feared in the first place.
What a weakling.
What a weakling. He just topples it by tapping it with the pole.
Of course.
Of course. Because the wisdom of your ancestry will tell you that way of being is weak.
Is so incarnate. Weak that we've departed from it ages ago.
Right. It's insectile. Mm-hmm.
And so I know we went through those slides pretty quick, but that was kind of one topic, that robot.
It's always a little bit interesting, too, because whenever we split the episode up and look at sort of the pacing of it and also the beginning and end of it at once, we kind of see how these episodes are actually very intentionally sandwiched in certain ways, right? So then we're going to transition into now the second sort of leg of the episode, right?
Right. And the second leg of the episode starts with the criticism levied against Bluma by Oolong. And I think that this is encapsulated in this scene, but particularly here, Oolong offers himself to be Bluma's mate in those terms. Now, there's a couple things to realize. It's that Oolong as an extension of Bluma's masculine psyche, right? She should accept this not in terms of like a sexual relationship or anything like that, but in terms of marrying the two aspects of your psyche, the masculine and the feminine. It's something that happens in Snow White, in Sleeping Beauty. Love's first kiss is that idea of marrying your masculine and feminine aspects together.
Right, I was going to say this is more about integration of the self. And this is something that, if you look at Oolong as an extension of Bulma, this is the aspect of Bulma that's like, why won't you integrate me to better the both aspects of us, right? And of course, Bulma has set up this situation and strung along this aspect of herself and promised this aspect of herself that it will, not really promised, but manipulated this aspect of herself into thinking that it will ultimately be realized. And so here it is. It's saying, why don't you realize me?
Yeah. And it's a perfectly valid question. And Bluma, I don't think I have the next couple of slides of this particular conversation. Bluma rejects him. And
yeah, I think this is their big square off.
Though
argument.
It may sound like sour grapes, Oolong says that what she is going to wish for is not going to be good. He basically says that she is going to wish for someone who will be under her thumb, in a sense.
Right. And I think we've discussed this before, the idea that is a malformed way of seeing a relationship, because the relationship needs to be founded on something more principled and more aligned with what you yourself could define as good, right?
So you're saying women shouldn't dominate men, are unhappy from dominating men.
So what you're saying is,
and right, I mean, but that's partially true. If you, it's not all, but it is women who have no other choice but weak options, let's say, or maybe not even that, but what she surrounds herself with is that, or she manipulates people into being in her life because of that, right? All of those things combined. With those circumstances, dominating someone in that instance is not going to lead to a successful relationship, not even in the instance of kind of what you were saying, in which it needs to be balanced, right?
Right. It's kind of saying, like, if this is your wish, then what you're going to get is you're going to wish for your own ultimate unhappiness, because your wish is not it's not internally consistent, and your wish is not representative of the integration of the whole self.
You want to be challenged by your partner, let's say.
Well, you need to be in the mode of being where you're on the edge of the amount of chaos that you can handle. Right, and so this is, leaning so far back from that it will not fulfill. It will ultimately just be as hollow as Pilaf realizing he still just has the first ball. Having the thing.
It's kind of it's kind of a dual, a mirror, let's say, of what she's trying to achieve. And so she refuses to integrate. And she despairs because Goku comes back without the Dragon Balls. She says now they have all the balls and they probably made their wish, right? And I particularly wanted to mention this because it exemplifies the neuroticism that comes with the mode of being which Bulma adopts. If you have an idea that you're, let's say, superior and everyone should be doing your will and bidding, you're going to be way more susceptible to neurotic tendencies because you've separated yourself from the locus of control, even though you're basically in the middle of it. You've absolved yourself of the responsibility, and therefore you can't move forward.
Well, it's that place where as soon as you lose control of one thing, if you don't have control of yourself when that happens, then you feel like there's just no control in the world, right? And
exactly. The locus of control is shifted.
So in this case, it's like, I never had control of myself. This thing that I just thought that I was going to be given that I deserved. What if I don't deserve it?
But Bluma can't think that.
She can't think that yet. So instead, it's just despair.
Yeah. But she's saved because of the
Goku's
enlightenment attained by honoring your ancestors. Whereas the Noibo is the let's say, the wisdom of your ancestry, the respect you have for it, the enlightenment you've gained from that is what the 4-star ball in particular on Earth represents. And so that can't be taken away by an automaton.
Right. That is a personal. It's something that a person would have to personally obtain. It's not something that can just be delivered to them by an ideology.
Well, I not only that, I would say that it requires more of, let's say, the unholy trinity to undo the honor and reverence and the enlightenment you gained from that because of, let's say, the mode of being in which the robot was adopting.
Mm-hmm.
Or Shu. Because that wasn't necessarily... It partially arrogant, sure, but the resentment for being itself was not quite there, and we'll see what that looks like in the next couple of episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But here, Bluma is saved, salvationed. Let's say it's not a word. Salvation is not a word.
Sure it is.
There it is. Now you know. Now you know. So. She starts hugging Goku, and Goku's like, "Stop it!" And then Oolong says, "Do you want me to take your place to Goku?" Because he still longs to be integrated, as Bluma should also acknowledge.
He longs to be embraced, right?
Mm-hmm. But instead, as usual, and as unhealthy as it is, Bluma decides that she would rather abuse this part of her.
Right. Reject and tyrannize.
Mm-hmm. But I thought this was just a funny...
It's also a great panel.
Great panel. Just smacked. And so then... This is... I particularly got this one because this is when Bluma realizes her capsules are also gone. Oolong asks how we're going to get the Dragon Balls back because they have one, so obviously the wish can't be fulfilled yet. And Bluma instigates, or mentions, let's say, the fact that she has capsules from the last town. Only, again, her arrogance and her deceit, right? Her arrogance or her deceit in saying that I can keep the wisdom of society and treat Oolong like trash.
Even though the wisdom of society says that I need to respect
even
my
though
relationship
it's true
with him.
Right. Even though that's what it's telling me, I think I can still keep that and treat Oolong like trash. And
society's wisdom will take me to the place that will get me what I want.
Right. Even still, with
none of that happens.
With the disrespect of society, right, basically. And so none of that does happen. And it's, again, the neuroticism of someone who's in Bluma's situation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not narcissistic, but very self-centered.
Well, it's the fragile, egoistic sort of mode of being.
Yes. But don't worry. Our boy's here to save the day. Yamcha.
Yeah, he's going to grab this situation with his Wolf Fang fist.
Oh, he's going to. So here, he's saying that we have to help them. To Puar.
Right. He is still saying that he needs to help them, or they won't be able to get him the Dragon Balls.
Which is interesting because in this very shot, it seems that he's already through voluntary what is it called in psychology? Exposure. Yeah, voluntary exposure therapy. By slowly being more and more around Bluma, it seems like he's needing that wish less and less.
It's almost as if pursuing the wish is fulfilling the wish for him.
Right. And it's for Yamcha in particular because that's where he is. And some young men may find themselves in that situation where they've lost track of their morality. They've unintegrated with their feminine aspect. And the way out of that is simply to align with what you can perceive to be good.
And orient yourself towards it in the capacity that
and so many things
you are able to.
So many things will be fixed as a result that it may even solve your problems just by following it, just by orienting yourself towards it.
Right. Just by changing your mode of being, it may become resolved by default.
Right. And additionally, it is significant that Bluma, well, let me say, it's significant that Yamcha's lack of morals in his introduction is solved by his pursuit of the Dragon Balls, but it is the interactions with Bluma that develop him as a character.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many facets to this show.
Oh yeah,
it's such a complicated show.
It's great because I always kind of point this out that like these characters work on multiple axes as sounding boards for each other, and they kind of have this interconnected dynamic, and it's great to look at. Like Goku doesn't have a lot going on character-wise this episode, right? He's like, see stuff, he's like, wow, I'll go get, oh, okay, wow, that didn't work. Wow, what's this? Wow. And he just kind of goes from point to point, but Yamcha, it's much more interesting because it's sort of you're probably gonna hate this analogy, but it's like the Superman-Batman dichotomy of like, Goku is obviously a better character than Yamcha, but it's very interesting to have Yamcha coming along on this and trying to overcome his own insufficiencies, and he's actually oriented towards it. But it's just very interesting for him because it's like his fallibility is what makes this so great. He has like his own path to go on to try to struggle to be able to well, I don't want to call it integrate, but it's like he is getting closer to a mode of being that is actually good.
Mm-hmm.
At least as far as he can perceive it.
Well, I would say,
whereas Goku is already
in this
good.
particular instance, right? But as we move on through the series, especially once we get past this season, or even episode 13 or 14, let's say, we are going to have some things to talk about with Goku's character.
Mm-hmm.
I think that
Goku
actually takes Superman further than Superman takes Superman.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
But yeah, they're somewhat of similar characters, let's say.
Similar in the sense that it's like Yamcha is the unrealized and potential Goku, right? It's like his character is not there, but he has at least come into contact with Goku, right?
Right. Never mind, I just had a thought. But let's go on. So, he's used to it now. He's going to help them. He's going to give them a ride. And so, Bluma's freaking out, like, how are we going to get there? And Goku says they can walk. And Oolong's like, hey, it's too bad you can't ride the Keen-Tone. And she's like, you can't ride it either.
It's great, this mutual self-loathing sort of.
Right, but that's the thing. The deflection from saying, you're right, it's a problem that I can't write it. Maybe I should fix that. It's like, you can't write it either.
It's like, you being here
poison the well. Just poison the well, right?
Mm-hmm.
It does enable, right? If I have people, back to the thought simp analogy, if I have people supporting me in my unethical behavior, then it's fine. It's justified because they support me.
Right. It's not just me that thinks this, therefore I can be justified in it. Like, this person supports me in thinking this, so, like, I don't have to have the responsibility of the way that I'm acting or thinking.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I also like Bluma's expression. She's so neurotic in this episode. It's hilarious.
She's freaking the hell out.
And Goku's just...
Yeah, it's like I said with Goku. He's just going from point to point in this episode, just staring.
Well, he really is observing, and that's what kids do. They soak up the knowledge around them, right? And then as they mature, they begin to take action as characters. And it's significant to note that both Oolong and Bluma are older than Goku.
Mm-hmm.
And so they get in the car with Yamcha, and Yamcha, this is how he invites them into the car. He says, "Oh, what a surprise. Come on down. We'll give you a ride." And he is sweating profusely. He's screaming. His mouth is
the only person more neurotic than Bulma in this episode.
Yeah, but it's not from lack of moral fortitude. In fact, it is only moral fortitude that is getting him through the experience to begin with. It's almost an inversion of Blooma's neuroticism. This is positive neuroticism, going through something distressing.
Yeah, we're seeing him confronting his fear right here, right? It's like he's freaking out, but
he is doing it.
But he is conquering his fear.
Yeah. Unlike last episode where he ran and hid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to. I do like this frame as well because of Yamcha's expression.
We're also back to the tooth.
It's. Oh, and I wanted. Did I mention that already?
You did bring it up. That it is a motif in this episode.
Well, I kind of want to mention back on what I was saying, I think, before the stream about the tooth. Going back to Goku and Yamcha's first instance of fighting when he knocks out the tooth.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to mention, I mentioned this to you earlier before we started the stream, of why he would lose a tooth.
Right. I remember this now.
Yes. And the reason he would lose a tooth, and let's say the reason that the malformed masculine would lose a tooth when combating or challenging that which makes order from chaos through the ancestral wisdom and respect of Goku, let's say. And the reason is because for a malformed masculine to do that, it's biting off more than you can chew.
I think that's ultimately what it is.
And so you even lose your ability to chew by a margin by doing that very thing.
It's multifaceted for Yamcha too, because it's also tied into, like, his ability to chew is tied into his attractiveness, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about having teeth, right?
Mm-hmm. It's your bite. It is your masculine spirit.
It harms his masculine spirit to challenge that, to let's say carelessly denigrate
exactly
the wisdom of the past.
Insofar as knowingly,
concerned. I think it's significant to say knowingly as well, because the first time they fight is not when he knocks out the tooth. He knows about the Noibo. He knows about Grandpa Gohan, and he still challenges Goku again.
Right. The fact that he sees the power of it, he is willfully blind in a sense, and says, whenever they come up against each other, I think he loses the tooth when he says, he's got the gun out, and then he puts the gun away and says, I can't pass up a chance to try to fight Goku again. And it's like, all right, if you're so sure. And he gets his tooth knocked out.
And you're going to challenge that mode of being with your own, and how let's say unceremoniously you were brought low by the fact that not you, but Yamcha's mode of being is so inferior to Goku's mode of being.
Also the fact that it happens, even though Bulma's not conscious, it happens in front of Bulma, right? So this damage to his masculine spirit also, I think, is tied into the fact that Bulma was present at the time that this happened, right? Her unconsciousness isn't, I don't take it to be so literal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like, in the face of that thing, when you are the defeated lobster, you lose a tooth.
Mm-hmm. You're less likely to go out there again.
Mm-hmm.
But Yamcha is not a loser lobster.
That's right. He stretches out and flexes his wolf-fang fists.
There we go. Very well. And so as soon as Bluma gets into the car,
just look at her.
She yanks Puar out of there. She cannot have an unintegrated female
She's like, this is my spot.
Yeah, this is my spot, right? I'm not in charge, but she basically is. They're going where she is telling them to go in a manner.
I mean, she's like, this is my seat, this is my role. Like, you don't need this while I'm here.
Exactly. It's kind of that girlfriend that may not necessarily respect the other. May not necessarily respect the other feminine forms in your life, especially in this example here of Yamcha's malformed masculinity being discoupled from his femininity, right?
Well, I think it also is that women are not going to, for no reason, show respect for your idea of what femininity is. So in this case, the immature Yamcha has an idea of what femininity is.
And shattered instantly.
As soon as she gets in the car with him, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like Poir is not relevant. Poir, Yamcha can't pay attention to Poir while she's around, I would say.
Right, because
she is filling in that gap. She's substantial, whereas Poir is not.
Right. She is instantiating a reality about women rather than perception.
And so now in the car, Yamcha's relationship with women and what he is interpreting about that relationship is represented with Bulma instead of Poir in the front seat, because it's like Yamcha can gather so much more information and grow so much more from the substantial interactions he's going to have with Bulma, rather than just dwelling on the idea of the feminine.
And it's kind of Yamcha's hiding behind his mother's skirts in this instance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just pulled away. You can't hide behind a notion of femininity when you're confronted with a real version of it. So, let's go on. I like this picture.
Yeah, I would say this is a good runner-up for thumbnail picture.
Yeah, I think Brok, you specifically wanted to use that one for the thumbnail, but this was a good second pick.
I think this is a good pick too,
because it is the full Dragon Crew. This is our original Dragon Crew.
I mean, poor Poir back there, but yeah. But I think that's funny happy. Considering what we just said.
Everyone is aligned in this shot, and that's what makes it great.
It is pretty good.
Even Yamcha's like overwhelmed with joy, being able to interface. He is overcoming his fear and enjoying it.
Well, I mean, think about what's happening here, right? So Goku's on the Nimbus. The tangible masculine and feminine are aligned. The hypothetical masculine and feminine are aligned. Everyone has a mode of being that's carrying them over the desert towards the same destination, and everybody is happy. It's like, yes, we have oriented both tiers that Goku is aware of the feminine and the masculine, towards a goal.
It's significant to show Goku away from this, because he's going to instantiate these ideas later on as we go through. But the integration of the masculine and the feminine here allows Goku to orient himself towards what they know to be the goal. He doesn't have to ride with them in this instance, let's say. Mm-hmm.
This allows him to just be riding the Nimbus.
And observe, which is what he does a lot in this season and episode. Anything else about this besides... I love Oolong's face as well. He's so excited to be on the ride. Like, they're all on their way to what they have agreed upon is a goal, even though it is malformed, unspecific, and possibly selfish in nature.
Yeah, I think it's just that if they align by default, this is a good thing.
Well, it's also to say that you don't gain happiness by having. You gain happiness by the journey you're on.
Mm-hmm.
which we can see the frame that's used by Pilaf is the exact opposite. He never journeys.
Exactly. He is, well, castle in the desert.
So Bluma asks Yamcha and Puar to close their eyes so that she can pull out the dragon radar. And we've talked about the dragon radar on numerous occasions. But it's, like I said earlier, it's the integration of the knowledge of the past and the innovation of the present that is able to map out the meaning. It's a map of meaning. In this instance, we see the path to confront the dragon and get the gold is mapped here by the integration of those two ideas. Whereas the other dragon radar that was 3D, right, is not a product of respect or integration, but of arrogance and, let's say, ill thought out sacrifice, or no sacrifice at all.
Yeah, it's higher resolution, but it isn't ultimately of the same kind of use. It doesn't orient in the same way.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm saying, though. I think the reason for that is that this is integrating two ideas, one of which you have to subordinate yourself for you to be able to understand it and use it efficiently, whereas Pilaf does not subordinate himself to any idea.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, because as we'll see in the next few episodes.
And that's something redeeming about Bluma, even early on. She can subordinate herself to an idea, which is more than, let's say, Pilaf could do.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want to just trash on Bluma the whole time.
Well, yeah, I mean, Pilaf is ultimately just subordinate to the thing itself, to the ownership of the thing. It's the sort of the I want to call it egoistic, but it's the ultimate expression of pride, that is to say that, like, my mode of being is so far superior to every other mode of being that I deserve to have everything.
There is nothing
this castle in the desert aside from all of society.
Right, there's nothing superordinate to me, right?
Right, that all value in the world should be given to me in this space that is not reflective of anyone but me and the things that I have.
Yeah, and so he's unable to see Dragon Balls even as far away as the desert that he's in.
Right, he can't see past the tip of his nose because of that.
Yeah, basically.
And it just so happens that the reason that he gets the Dragon Balls from them in the first place is their own weakness, not his strength.
Mm-hmm. Precisely, because if they were aligned, it would be unlikely that Shu would have been able to take the Dragon Balls from them to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And so we move on, and Bluma she basically tells Yamcha we need to go this way to find the Dragon Balls, and says he can open his eyes. Now, the significant thing I want to mention about the eyes is that Yamcha's under the impression that Bluma is going to give him a kiss. So he is anticipating that. She's not in that mindset, and I think the reason for the schism here is that Bluma cannot fathom, for some reason, that this could possibly be part of her wish here. The journey could be fulfilling her wish.
Well, I think it's funny for a deeper reason than that. See, they get into Yamcha's car, right? And so they're traveling along. Yamcha's driving them. And Bulma asks Yamcha while he's driving to close his eyes. And doesn't explain why. So his interpretation of that is that he's going to receive a kiss from her, right? That her intentions are to express
gratitude
or attraction to him, mm-hmm. right? And so
he's helping her.
So he willfully does so while driving the car, and she uses that opportunity to look at the dragon radar to see where the next ball is, or more specifically, how close she is to realizing her plan that will get her her wish. And the reality is that it's right next to her, right? Like, this boyfriend is the one next to her who is experiencing her intentions as well, but she is not transparent to herself. She is not integrated oolong, let's say. She hasn't come together to understand what it is that she's actually looking for. But it's this funny sort of disconnect between the two of them in this situation that I just really respect Toriyama's humor.
Well, also, I think it's a good initiation to their actual relationship. We barely have seen them interact before this. This is the most
practically
we've seen.
Haven't.
Yeah, practically haven't. And I just want to point out, Yamcha's eyes are open. They're very open from his interactions with the female, because that's what awakens the male consciousness, and especially the malformed male consciousness is awakened by the positive female aspect here. And even though it's duplicitous, it's in the orientation that Yamcha already wants to go in anyways. She didn't even have to tell him to do that.
It's bringing them along because this is the thing that will get Yamcha to his wish as well.
And cheek rub.
So cheek rub.
Obviously a manipulation that she doesn't have to do, but she always, as always, enjoys exerting her power sexually over men, which will pretty much remain consistent.
Yep, that's just a part of Bloomer, and her name, being Bloomer and whatnot.
Yeah, Bloomer. Okay, Bloomer.
Okay, Bloomer.
And so after seeing this interaction, Goku cannot fathom not being forthright. So he sees two people not being forthright, being deceptive towards each other, not speaking out their truth, and he just can't understand why they would. So what a weird person.
Still just nonchalant Goku watching
in the
all
English,
this stuff.
Though, in the English he says, well, that was weird.
It's actually a really funny cutaway.
Yes. Because Goku he can't fathom it. He is on the path. He is forthright. He tells the truth. We will see his interaction with femininity. And it is so forthright and so truthful that that's all he really needs to interact. And then it's done.
Yeah, there's no complexity to it.
And there shouldn't be. The complexity is self-induced, as we see in this instance, right?
Right. The complexity is a result of lack of transparency and honesty with the self and with the other.
And Goku doesn't have that deception, so it's not an issue. Then we cut back to good old Pilaf with the one tooth. Now he's maniacal. In the Japanese audio of this, he just screams.
He just shrieks. He screeches. He's like, ah! He's just like, scraw.
And so, but here he is overwhelmed with joy that he has them.
He has all of them.
He has them, and he did not have to sacrifice a single thing on his journey.
He didn't have to take a journey.
There was no journey. They are.
He was right that he deserved them.
He was right that if he waited around long enough, things would just come to him.
It would just work out because the way that he was doing things was always the right way to be doing things.
It was the better way.
It was the best way because it was what he knew.
Right. And that motive being obviously is very
it has
negatively portrayed in this anime.
I mean, for sure.
And so he's so happy, he's dancing around, and Shu and Mai are trying to tell him that they're not all there. Willfully blind for a few moments. And it's interesting
they have to tell him multiple times.
Because why wouldn't someone celebrate why would the motive being that Pilaf adopts celebrate when he has achieved his goal, which is having them? He has them.
The plan worked out. He has them.
But he doesn't have the 4-star ball. And in particular, like we said, because of what that represents. Cannot be attained by an automaton. But we will see how he does maybe manage to get in the next episode or so. And we talked about the 4-star ball already.
Right. Well, it's obvious why he doesn't have it. Right. And why he doesn't deserve it. Because he is doing everything but respecting the wisdom of the masculine ancestry.
In fact, he celebrated as if it was his own victory when he did nothing.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Which that wisdom only comes from being self-sufficient and doing the things for yourself. That's why Goku has it at the very beginning, and
when he can do things for himself. Exactly.
We see him at the top of his own hierarchy.
Yes. And he has adopted the wisdom of the past such that he was able to function and be sufficient. And that is part of the wisdom of the past, is to be sufficient, to take care of oneself, to be able to do so.
Right.
And then you can extend your horizons. You can't... Goku has his room cleaned up in the beginning. Some of these rooms need to be cleaned. Pilaf's room is a mess.
Well, Pilaf is the culmination of ultimately how not to be, right? Because we see it's like, okay, here's Bulma, and her masculine aspect is not integrated well. And here's Yamcha, and his feminine aspect isn't integrated well.
And Pilaf,
but
neither.
Look at Pilaf.
Right, neither of them are integrated.
Pilaf is sort of this, we talk about the unholy trinity. This is sort of an unholy duality, right? The unholy duality of the unintegrated masculine and feminine.
Right, but the thing that Pilaf really is missing is the resentment.
Right.
He hasn't yet awakened a force that has the resentment to carry the unholy trinity to its ultimate conclusion.
Mm-hmm. We'll get there eventually.
Mm-hmm. We're not talking about Super.
Oh, no. I'm talking about Dragon Ball.
Dragon Ball. And so, they take a look back at the radar, which has changed. See, that's another thing I find interesting, is that so many of the villains' dragon radars, right, they're like constantly changed, they're being updated, but the simplicity and the, let's say, utility of the original dragon radar is more valuable than the constructions of arrogance.
Right. It doesn't need to be a high-resolution thing if you're going to miss the mark by miles.
Mm-hmm. And so, but here we do see the Dragon Ball coming to join the 6 other ones that Pilaf has. And I wanted to mention this because it's more of that, it's more reinforcing that idea of Pilaf, that the things will just come to him and he deserves them because he is who he is.
He deserves them for existing and being the protagonist of his own story.
Yep. Regardless of how much humility is there, which there's not much. So, here we are. The castle will be here for a while. It's a great setting. And we've spoken briefly about the castle in the very first few episodes. How castles protect treasure.
Mm-hmm.
And in this instance, the castle is protecting the ultimate treasure, which is to gain enlightenment by confronting the Dragon of Chaos. And here, we have not a walled garden, right? This isn't a paradise. It's a stone monument to isolation.
Mm-hmm. This is like, you could sort of think of this as like the center of the desert, right? It's like the point where Pilaf can be the furthest from integration. It's like, not only is he in the desert, but and not only has he committed to living in the desert, right? Because Yamcha was as well, but he didn't have a castle in the desert. He had a sort of a cave.
It was like a hovel, right? It was
hovel.
A temporary thing. It wasn't a permanent, this is where I will be. Where here he's ingratiated himself into the idea of solitude.
Right. Well, it's an empty castle,
He has no guards.
It's just
all
physically a castle.
Well, and when we get into it, we'll see it's all machinations of his own mind, his own ego, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
This is a construction of his own ego, protecting his own ego.
Right, allowing him to continue to be here in, well, the desert of all places.
Mm-hmm. And so they arrive at this edifice. And as they go inside, Goku pushes open the door. It seems the door is open. Now, like we were saying about Pilaf, he does embody two of pieces of the unholy trinity, that being arrogance and deceit. So those two things, he is going to try and trick them using his ego, basically. That's his modus operandi here in the castle. And it's significant to mention because it's almost an internalization of his own mind, what goes on in the castle. For Pilaf, that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everyone's shocked as well because they're seeing a hallway that's all dark ahead of them. I think I do want to mention, though, real quick, when they got there in the car, Puar checks on Yamcha, and he goes on to say that he can't wait to get his wish from the dragon. So even though he's further along, let's say, than Bluma in realizing that the interface between the two of them is exactly what each one of them needs, he still has a mind to get rid of his weakness, what he perceives as a weakness.
Right. He may not be recognizing right now that the way that he can get rid of his weakness is by getting the Dragon Balls in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
He still is oriented towards it. And, you know,
so
ultimately that's typically enough.
Yeah, just briefly wanted to mention that. And so in there, they immediately are confronted with the unknown. It's particular to mention the fact that this hallway is unlit, and it continues to be unlit throughout the entire episode. So they must plunge into the darkness here to get to the enlightenment that they seek.
Right, and you know, and taking the castle out of the context of it being Pilaf's castle, it's sort of an interesting idea to think of the party coming to this, you know, idea of a castle in a desert and going in and having to confront the unknown within to reach that ultimate enlightenment.
Well, right, and this is like I said, a manifestation of Pilaf's mind, which is as close as you can get. Well, not as close as you can get because he doesn't fully embody the unholy trinity, but it's somewhat close to its own hell. And that's why there's, let's say, glowing-eyed bats in here, right? It's because Pilaf has made his own life hell. And now, since they've entered here, they're able to experience that as well.
It's sort of like, let's say you were in the desert tripping on some mushrooms, and you would be forced to confront this thing that exists in the solitude of the desert. You know, it represents the Pilaf's mind, but because of that, it represents the hypothetical part of all of our characters' minds that they could be in if they embodied,
if they pathologized their own, what they know to be right. If they pathologize the ideas of what they know to be right, like Cain, for example,
mm-hmm.
then you create a hell. And hell is not an informidable place, let's say. And so here we have a castle that's substantiating Pilaf's hell and guarding his ego, right?
Right, and you could also look at it as the hell that is thinking like Pilaf, or the hell that is being like Pilaf.
Right, that's part of the mode of being, exactly. And so here we're going to see some demonic imagery, right? This is some demonic imagery right here already. And so the bats fly around and scare everyone, and Bluma decides to go look to Yamcha for shelter because she does not think he is the malformed masculine. in her opinion, or in her perception, I should say, he is just the masculine, as it should be, which goes to show you.
Well, compared to Oolong,
I was going to say, goes to show you her, let's say, stunted masculine formation, compared to Yamcha is, right? Exactly that. He is the masculine, or at least the masculine as she thinks.
You know, and this is sort of the realization that maybe Bulma's wish isn't as well formed as she thinks it is, right? Because it's like, okay, my wish is that I want a boyfriend, and she encounters Yamcha, and it's like, wow, this is the best representation of a boyfriend that I've ever seen, and she doesn't realize how malformed he really is, especially because she's been unconscious in his presence for so long. So we're being forced into the same space and trapped together, so that she has to confront the idea that maybe her wish isn't as well formulated as she thinks it is.
Oh, this is definitely kind of a wake-up call to that. This instance in particular, because she does seek shelter from Yamcha, the masculine form that is Yamcha, and he pushes her away. Now he pushes her away because he, unlike in the car, there is space for her to be besides right next to him, right? In the car, it was kind of he was almost not dominated like in the Oolong sense, but he was trapped in that same mode of transportation, the same mode by which you can get to where you need to be.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's sort of that crash course, and just like, let's just cram. I mean, this is it, right? We're at the end of the season, so it's like, let's cram all of these characters into a space and make them interact with each other and sort of feel each other out, because they're really ideas, and they're really like modes of being and aspects of, not just aspects of the self, but like aspects of the realization of the potential of the self. That people need to prod and come to understand.
I like Bluma's face too.
It's also pretty funny.
Well, and I picked this particular one because it was at the point where Yamcha had already pushed her away, but realized that he shouldn't have. And you can see that on his face.
He does look pretty great. Like he's sweating, and he looks regretfully afraid.
Yes, it's such good animation, because I can tell the exact emotion he's trying to portray. He already knows he kind of messed up here. But it's just a reaction, right? It's just simply a reaction from his weakness, let's say, that he still has a ways to go. This is just Toriyama reaffirming he still has ways to go. And that Bluma's conceptualization of the masculine and her idea of Yamcha has so far superseded Yamcha in reality.
And that it was flawed, and that even if he is her greatest representation of masculinity, then that is also flawed.
Yes. But he does save her, because as they continue walking, they spring a trap of pilafs, which are these stone columns which are attempting to crush the dragon crew. Now, I think this is significant because it is duplicitous in its origins, right? You don't know where the trap is going to spring from, and it is let's say a little sadistic in the method in which you would, let's say, perish from one of these traps. And so we see an intonation of Pilaf here. What Pilaf's true sinister nature could be, right? And we're going to learn more about that as we see more into his mind within the castle. This is just a small bit of it.
Yeah, I didn't really have many thoughts about the nature of the trap. It's kind of like...
Think about the nature of the multiple traps going forward, right? Those say a lot about Pilaf as well. Especially next episode.
Right. Well, I mean, it's kind of like the first thing that happens is the trap is that they're getting boxed in, right? It's like they're trapped into they're all trapped together in a small space, right?
We'll get to that. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, just this trap that they're in right
this
now.
one. Okay, yeah, the one with
Because
the pillars.
they couldn't escape because a wall came down and they were trapped.
Yeah.
Between two walls as these pillars came in crashing to like crush them, right? And so it's almost as if the test is like protect each other.
Mm-hmm. And see how flexible you can be, right?
Because it's the pillars are coming for all of them. And so, so this is a test for Yamcha to pass, and it's the opportunity for him to
kind of redeem what he did.
Yeah, redeem what has just happened.
By let's say challenging the deceptive nature of Pilaf here and showing that his pattern of being, Yamcha's pattern of being, is still superior, let's say, to Pilaf's weak intonation of maliciousness.
Well, also think about Yamcha's progression as a character here. Like, when we met him, he was in a cave in the desert with his few things and his unlit candle, and it was sort of like he couldn't defeat his surroundings then. But here he's destroying the machinations of a whole castle in the desert for Bulma. So he has definitely progressed.
Right. That is indeed what springs him to action in this, as well as Bulma's safety.
So yeah, I think this is also just a good representation here now that we can see him overcoming these traps. It's more about him overcoming where he came from, realized as its logical conclusion.
But then Goku's like, all right, I've had enough of this. And by using the Noibo, the wisdom of your ancestry, let's say, he's easily able to dismantle the deception and sadistic nature of Pilaf in this initial trap here.
Mm-hmm. It's like it's a very inelegant trap. It's basically just like,
and it's met and defeated with
like
inelegance.
Does the existence of it just crush you?
Yeah. Is the weight of my ego enough to suppress you, to make you quit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And clearly, Goku.
I mean, Goku has the Noibo. So.
Yeah, I mean, he's not gonna get stopped by that. So they continue on, but Pilaf is upset. He said, "Who made that trap?" And it was him. And he doesn't say anything. He just blushes because he cannot accept responsibility.
Right, well, he can't accept the responsibility for the idea he has that simply the weight of his own ego is enough to destroy all that the characters represent, coming to basically his reckoning.
His ego supersedes the moral strength of the characters, which is obviously not true.
And when it doesn't work, he's like, why would that not work? And that aspect of himself says, like, well, you've been assuming that it would work forever.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And this is where the arrogance comes in, right? And so they continue on. They are very suspicious now in the dark hallway. They're kind of along the wall here to prevent themselves from getting into another trap like they just did. I like this because it shows the characters have progressed a little in how they're approaching this castle. Still, with none of them having a properly formed orientation for the Dragon Balls, though, it's going to be hard to resist, let's say, the temptations that are going to be laid out before them. This is one step in the right direction, but we're going to see in the next one a little bit more. Did you want to say something about this?
Oh, no. I actually don't remember. I somewhat remember the next episode, but I don't remember the specifics.
No, not the next episode. I mean, like the next couple of slides we're going to see.
Oh, let's see it. So,
they find some arrows.
Yeah, that's right.
Which they decide to follow. Because they decide to follow because they have no other orientation on which to go on. Because they have a malformed orientation to begin with.
Right. I think the arrows are more just that, like, oh, okay, you can navigate this way of thinking. Well, like, here's the next logical conclusion, or like, this is what it like logically leads to for you. And if you don't have a formulated reason not to go that direction, it's like, what else would you do?
Yeah, if you don't have a if you don't have a place to stand, someone else will give you a place to stand, and it may not be the place that you want to stand.
Right, and it's like you're in somebody else's castle. It's like, okay, you're occupying the mode of being that, not just the mode of being, but like the state of being that castle represents.
And so they follow those arrows only to be trapped. It was an obvious trap. Alas. But I think it's important to note that the trap itself and how they are corralled in this space is kind of what you were talking about earlier, about how they're going to be confined and have to interact with each other in order to integrate, in order to be able to get out of here and challenge the ideas of Pilaf. It's not even false or faux malevolence that Pilaf represents. It's just it's almost unrealized, kind of like Yamcha's unrealized masculine. It's like the unrealized malevolence.
Yeah, it's like the potential for malevolence.
Maybe even predecessor.
Yeah.
And so they get trapped in here thanks to, well, their own lack of moral guidance, their own lack of, let's say, orientation. And so Pilaf is overjoyed. He knows he's going to be able to get the 4-star ball now. And that's actually how I wanted to relate those two ideas. So though he wasn't able to get the 4-star ball, let's say the ball of the ancestral reverence, right? The reverence for self-sufficiency that's part and parcel with the 4-star ball. The reason that Pilaf's not able to get that earlier in this episode is because the automatonic nature of the robot, along with being guided by the mishandled shoe, let's say, is insufficient to grapple with those ideas. However, now that Pilaf has trapped them, let's say, he is able to formulate a notion in which he's able to do that. And there are certain weaknesses, let's say, to that mode of being. And we're going to see those in the next episode. We'll talk about that more in the next episode when the Dragon Ball, that 4-star Dragon Ball, is actually taken away from Goku.
Well, it is important to relate this back to the robot, too, because, specifically what is happening, to pull the lens out just a little bit further, is that, so this thing happens between Bulma and her masculine aspect. Immediately, whenever the masculine aspect breaks down and says, I'm not going to drive this anymore, sort of an unchained masculine aspect inside of the insect robot comes and takes all of the Dragon Balls except for the 4-star ball. 4-star ball being something that I guess in this analogy I would want to say needs to be given up willingly, right? So that breakdown in the desert where the majority of the path is lost to them puts them in a place where they need to, well, I say they need to, it leads them into the space that is Pilaf's way of being, and they have to conquer it because of where they have gotten themselves for this dysfunction, right? And so Pilaf can get the 4-star ball from them once they're there because they are embodying Pilaf by being inside of his castle. It's sort of like Pilaf having the 4-star ball is the risk of the hero having the 4-star ball and being at that place, this place that Pilaf is, this headspace. It is I call him like the potential malevolence because it's like he is the potential malevolence in in you, in the hero, like the hero that the show is trying to speak to, right? It's saying that, like, if you are here, if you have gone all this way and you still don't integrate properly, you could find yourself here where potentially the 4-star ball could be taken by this malevolent and impotent part of yourself to create something even worse.
There's a little bit more to it than that we'll get into the next episode because of how specifically it's taken.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's also, I wanted to mention that it is, though Shu gets the Dragon Balls because of, let's say, the schism between Bluma and Oolong, Goku is separate from that. And Goku's the one with the ball. He did not misstep.
Mm-hmm.
In this instance, he and Yamcha and all of them decide to follow the arrows. And that is an error, right? And so we'll get into it more, though. We'll get into it a lot more next episode. But Pilaf's overjoyed, and that is going to bring us to... Is this the last or second to last?
I think this is the last.
No, this is not the last. This is the second to last. So
this is the second.
This actually shows at the very end of this episode. This is the last one for this episode.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So here, it just shows the Dragon Balls. This is kind of the narrator talking, and I wanted to mention specifically that all these Dragon Balls, like, you can't even see the stars on these, right? This is just illumination, and it's very low resolution. Look at the background. It's all out of focus, right? And it's because right now, like Brok was saying, we're instantiated into the psyche of Pilaf. This is Pilaf's interpretation of the Dragon Balls. It's very low resolution, but blindingly brilliant light.
Right. It's Pilaf's interpretation of the wisdom that is at play here. It's sort of just like Dragon Balls is Dragon Balls. Just having the Dragon Balls is having the Dragon Balls.
Is valuable in and of itself. And that's kind of why the numbers of the stars aren't there, because that transcendence towards the heavens is not imaginable by Pilaf.
Mm-hmm.
Because he has not subordinated himself to an idea like that.
Right, and I think that's also tied into why he would just think he had all of them when he didn't. You know, it's just like, I have the Dragon Balls.
Yeah,
it's very low resolution.
It's all
so
low
much
resolution.
So that he doesn't even want to count them and keep up with, like, what that path looks like.
Right, and yeah, it's specifically low resolution in this, and it is from Pilaf's perspective. So that is episode 10. The Dragon Balls are stolen.
The Dragon Balls are stolen. That's what happened in the episode.
Let's go ahead and recap a little bit, but I would say in the beginning, right, Bluma, Oolong, Goku are traveling in the mode of transportation provided by society, and given many things last episode for confronting malevolence where it was rearing its head, is all taken away by Bluma's disregard and disrespect for the manner of being and the masculinity, although small it is, that Oolong represents. From there, the misguided and malformed masculine with a single-minded orientation is able to not only destroy their vehicle, but take all of the prizes they were able to gain from society in the last episode. Because if you intonate and act in such a way as to denigrate part of yourself, then you may not deserve or be able to keep that knowledge that you've gained.
Right, you haven't done the necessary maintenance to preserve it.
And so then we see the interface of masculine and feminine being done in a proper format. And we see that actually gets them where they want to be. more easily than before.
Well, that interface is what leads them to the ability to get the Dragon Balls back.
Right, exactly. Without that interface, they would have no chance because neither Bluma nor Oolong have been able to be forthright enough to ride the Nimbus.
Mm-hmm.
So then we see an introduction and entrance to not only a stone fortress that guards Pilaf's ego, but an instantiation of his own mentality within the fortress. So the first trap we see is him trying to use his will and ego to crush our heroes metaphorically and physically. Then we see the lack of orientation coming to basically ruin our hero's plan, because without an orientation, they fall for the first one that's given to them, and like we said, it's one that's not gonna be something good for you if you're oriented by someone else. And so in the end, they're trapped from their own lack of forthrightness and honesty in this room to be subject to Pilaf's whims, and that is the episode.
Right, and I think subject to Pilaf's whims, I do want to tie this on a strange level to mythological thought, which is that it reminds me of an ancient way of thinking that when you are acting in a certain way, you're almost not even just almost, you are being possessed by the spirit of that idea, right? And
exactly.
And here they are, right? You could sort of think of Pilaf as that, right? It's like they have to act out this possession and overcome that which now is basically controlling them. Their orientation, where they're going, what they're doing, what they have to struggle with now is all at his whim, you know. So yeah, I think that it's also, I find it interesting that if you want to say that Pilaf's castle is sort of a representation of its psyche, it's also showing us just like this is what levels. Your mind will be if you exist like this. It's full of pitfalls for yourself and traps for yourself, and you can turn that on other people, and that is part of the archetypal realization of the concept of malice, is that you understand, you know, those pitfalls and you can turn them on other people, right?
You understand what hurts you, and therefore you can hurt other people.
Well, we see that he hurts himself constantly, right? He's constantly bullying his masculine and feminine aspects, abusing, so he knows exactly how to harm both of those.
Right? And so we can assume that it's not looking good for our dragon crew.
Mm-hmm.
Any last thoughts on this episode? We may have some addendums. We're gonna write them down this week because we forgot them.
We'll come back around to them at some point. We didn't remember them during the episode, but yeah, once we talk about this episode a little bit more, I think more will come to us.
I think we covered a lot, though, in this.
I think we're pretty thorough.
I'd thought about it since I watched it a couple weeks ago, I suppose. Anyhow, the next episode, everyone, will be The Penalty is Pinball, I believe it's called. It may be called something else in the Japanese, but I picked this particular one because this is a perfect example of the mode of being in which Bluma adopts in the face of malice, and how it actually helps her in the long run.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember the specifics of this episode. I remember what happens in it, but I'm excited to get back through it because when I watched it originally, I didn't interpret meaning from the whole pinball fiasco.
Oh, it's great.
So we'll see.
I'll just leave a little teaser. It's the inversion of the idea of Goku's weaponization of the idea of play.
I was thinking about that too. I didn't want to say it just yet, but yeah.
Just I have some thoughts. Little teaser. We'll get into that.
I'm glad I'm on the right track.
You are. So, next episode, we'll see lots of Bluma, lots of Pilaf, lots of Yamcha, and we will see what happens to our heroes. This was Get the Mic, episode 10. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe. I just left the space blank there because I didn't want to, say anything else. That's it. I just want you to subscribe. That's all.
Maybe mention this to someone if you ever hear them say
comment down below
stupid bullshit about how Dragon Ball's not deep or if the characters are boring.
Yeah, that's one thing.
Go listen to these guys.
I've been going around. Yeah, I've been going around trying to introduce a little bit of more analysis into some of the community videos that I've seen around. Hopefully it does. And if you guys want to comment, if you think differently, tell us why we're wrong. If you have a different interpretation. We'd love to talk about it. We'd love to read comments on the stream as well once there's more activity amongst the chat, let's say.
Oh yeah, no, I would like to get a little bit more discourse going just in general. It has helped us quite a bit whenever we're sort of communicating. There's only two of us, and as much as it seems like we're just dialing in and overanalyzing a 20-minute episode, even if we devote 2.5 or 3 hours to it, there's still aspects of it that we're gonna miss.
And what did you like about the episode? Because that can always lead you down a road that you can analyze. Particularly what you think is good. Good doesn't really have a demographic. If you can explain what's good as well, that's a pretty good indication that you can defend that position. And if that's something that you feel, defend it in the comments. We'd love to see it, even if it's something that disagrees with us.
Absolutely.
But anyways, we'll go ahead and wrap up here. I am your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
And this, again, was Get the Mic, episode 10. The Dragon Balls are stolen.
Dragon Balls are stole.